Hi everyone, it's Tony Tonkin here from the Child Protection Party. This is just one of those opportunities I'm taking to have a conversation with you because there was some interesting information came out of the government yesterday in regard to their cyber security policy and strategy. And so the part of that strategy which interested me and which I wanted to talk to you about was the issues around pedophilia. So I just want to say to everybody, welcome to CPP. So I'm about to play a clip from Peter Dutton where he talks about this particular issue. And on the other side of it, just want to have a conversation with you about what all of this means and how in particular this will impact all of us. So just stand by, watch Peter do his thing, and then we'll talk about who Peter is and what's really happening around these issues around cyber security and particularly its impact on pedophilia. Be back in just a minute. Watch this.
But the threat now online is as real as it's ever been. So if you're at home with your kids today, you're worried about who they're chatting to online. And if you're in a small business, you're worried that the next email that you click on may have a link to some ransomware. Or if you're in government, if you're running an energy retailer, you're worried about the threat of a state-based actor, or you're worried about somebody who may have malicious intent. And the reality is that all of us are spending more and more time online. So we need to have a strategy as a country to deal effectively with the threat. We wouldn't allow our kids to go down to the park knowing that they were talking to a pedophile in that local park. Why would we allow our kids to do that online? And we know now that the dark web is essentially the sewer of the internet where pedophiles and other criminal syndicates hang out, exchange images of children, and we are going after those people, and we want to make sure that people hear a very clear message that the government is determined to keep our kids safe, to keep small businesses safe, to make sure that if there is an attack on our telecommunications or our banking or our energy sector, that we have the ability to deal with that threat. We've seen here and elsewhere attacks on all sorts of institutions, overseas attacks on democratic election processes, and many more examples of the way in which criminal syndicates, particularly during the COVID period, have ramped up their activity to try and target online kids, families, businesses. And so I want to thank very much Andy Penn for the work that he's done, his leadership in the industry body that we brought together to advise and inform this strategy. It was a collective of probably the smartest minds that we could bring together to assist us in putting the strategy together. There's obviously been an enormous amount of work done by the Department of Defence, and I thank the Minister, Linda Reynolds, very sincerely, and similarly with Paul Fletcher, the Minister for Communications. But across government, we've really worked hard day and night to come up with this strategy. It's a $1.67 billion strategy over the course of the next decade that will help keep Australians safe online. Importantly today, we're announcing that we're going to have an extra 100 cyber detectives hunting down these criminal syndicates that are targeting our children online. The stories that we hear from our investigators are quite overwhelming, and the attacks now that we're seeing on all sorts of businesses but families as well, what should be a safe environment is not for many families, and we want to make that safe through this investment strategy, through this cyber strategy, and I'm very pleased that we're able to launch it today. But the threat...
So there we go. We have Peter Dutton talking to us from a position of strength, because I say that sarcastically because, you know, one's got to wonder about Peter Dutton's intent around this stuff. And I just need to be able to say that the issues around pedophilia are issues that have been there for a long, long time, for as long as there has been civilization, I suggest. But the reality is that there's been very little done to eradicate, to find those horrible, despicable people who abuse children in this most horrific way. And I think it's important that we find a way to be able to combat all of this, but the only way we can combat it is by the government coming in and doing things that are appropriate. But the problem that we have is that even though it's been there for years, why is it that the government's choosing to do this now? And there's an interesting take on this, I think, that we need to consider. Number one is what is Peter Dutton's motive here? Because I suspect that it's, I get a bit concerned that it's about controlling and investigating Australian citizens generally. I agree that we should be attacking the pedophiles, those people that use the dark web and other ways by which they can groom and abuse children. That is horrific. It's a heinous crime, and I don't think there'd be anybody who would disagree with me that we need to find ways to stamp it out and to eradicate it. But I do worry about the legislation that is expected to be launched that is going to combat this particular problem. And I'll just say a little bit about this later. But the other thing too is I want us to have a look at what Dutton said. Dutton said law enforcement agencies would target terrorists, pedophiles and drug traffickers operating in the dark web, promising proposed new powers will apply, and he quotes, to those people and those people only. And I guess my issue is, should we trust the government to make sure they can have more surveilling powers than they already do, and whether or not we can trust them enough to know that they're only targeting criminals and pedophiles and not the rest of us for some of the things that we may say or do that may not necessarily be criminal. So, on one hand, why now? Why now? Is it because the coronavirus has meant that there have been more and more people sitting at home, more and more children using the internet? Maybe so, but kids have always been using the internet through TikTok and all these other fancy apps that they have to communicate with each other, and through Facebook and Messenger and whatever and WhatsApp. And so everybody's been able to communicate with everybody for a long, long time. And pedophiles have been using these sites in order to groom and attract young people, lure them into their web of deceit and disgusting behaviour. But why now is the question I'm asking. And I think this is a conversation that we need to have. It's one thing to accept that the government is choosing to do something about pedophilia. About bloody time, you should have done it decades ago. I don't know why you're doing it just now necessarily. And that if you're going to find ways to eradicate pedophilia and to prevent people on not only the dark web but just the internet to prosecute people, and I think of the Shane McCall case where it was evident that he was on the web doing these terrible things, but didn't come out until after he was arrested for sexually assaulting 6 kids. And so did they know about him on the dark web? Did they know about his web activities prior to all of that or not? We don't know. And I think these are questions that we need to be able to ask and get some answer for. The other problem is that none of this has been legislated for at this particular point. So we need to find what is the legislation going to be? How does that protect us in the general population who are not involved in these terrible things, and make sure? And so what are the outcomes going to be? So who are the people? The web is a mysterious and elusive thing. Like there are ways by which people can get around on the web and not be identified. And so maybe they're going to improve the technology so that they can track people down through their ISP addresses, or maybe there's some other things that they're going to do that are of interest. But I think we need to be able to understand that we can't take what Dutton says as being something that's going to protect us, normal people, the good people in this population, and that we're not also going to be in some bizarre way targeted by some of these laws. And if they're going to target pedophile and criminality in general, well, that's to be celebrated. But we need to make sure that this system is transparent enough so that we know that those people, we know the names of the people who are either arrested or charged with pedophilia. I think we need to know who those people are in our community, and that we need to know that those people should not be protected because of their status, because of who they are in the community, because of the amount of money and finances that they have, and that we need to make sure that if this is happening, that those people are prosecuted appropriately. I just wanted to take some time out just to talk about this. I think this is an important aspect of what the Child Protection Party would be advocating for. So we're advocating for greater restrictions, of course, greater sort of ways of finding out who the pedophiles are and to have them eradicated. But also, we need to be mindful of our own human rights, and whether this legislation is going to step over that. We don't know the legislation yet. I doubt whether it's been drawn up, but it is their intent to focus on the issues around pedophilia and to find out who those people are on the dark web and elsewhere. But, I also want to know how they're going to track down and what work they're still doing at this particular point around grooming through all the other apps that are available, just normally available to kids, and how they're tracking them down and what success they're having, and whether that is just a federal police or whether it's a state police operation would be worth knowing as well. And if anybody has further information about any of this and would like to have a conversation with us about their views around pedophilia, how to track people down, not necessarily name people because I think that's risky, but to at least identify better ways of working so that pedophilia can be stamped out in this country and around the world so that kids can be safe. So thanks for being with us, everybody. Take care, and we look forward to catching up with you the next time we do a live feed. See you later. Be safe.